Hey guys, welcome back to Boring History Episodes. Tonight, we're not stepping into the tombs of kings. We're not tracing the paths of great conquerors. Instead, we step into the silent shadows of the past, where sacred rituals weren't always holy, and where the true cost of devotion was paid in blood. This is not the Egypt you've heard about. This is the hidden side, the one buried deep beneath the grandeur of the temples. Tonight, we'll be uncovering the horrifying reality behind the lives of temple virgins in Egypt. To see how women forced into a life of servitude, stripped of their identities and dignity, all in the name of religion. Imagine this. Ancient Egypt, a land of gods and myths, where priests wore golden robes and the air smelled sweet with offerings. But behind the grand temples and statues of gods, there was a far darker truth. Behind the masks of sanctity, young girls were chosen, not to become priestesses of light, but sacrifices, bound by law to the temple. They were stripped of their identities, forced into servitude, their names erased from history, only to be remembered as virgins of the gods, their fates sealed by the very priests who swore to protect them. This wasn't a sacrifice for the gods. It was a sacrifice for power. You're waking up now, cold stone beneath your bare feet, the air heavy with incense and the distant hum of chanting. You move toward the door, your heart pounding in your chest. You can feel the weight of the robe against your skin. You touch the rough fabric. The silence feels suffocating. You know the rules here. Speak not, move as they command. Your voice, your name, they are nothing now. Permission, CTA plus. Global check-in. If this dark history intrigues you, and you want to uncover more of the hidden stories that time tried to bury, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you too. Where are you tuning in from? What time is it on your side of the world? It's always fascinating to see how these stories travel, from one listener to the next. Now, dim the lights. Let the soft hum of the fan fade into the background. Take a deep breath. Feel the air cool your lungs. The weight of the history you're about to step into. The world outside fades away, and you're left in the dark silence of the temple, surrounded by forgotten whispers. Listen closely. Can you hear the faint shuffle of sandals on stone? The whisper of robes brushing against the cold walls? Now, imagine Egypt, 1200 BC. You stand inside one of the grandest temples, walls carved with gods, the air thick with incense. But in this temple, there is no holiness, only a twisted ritual. The priests approach, their faces hidden behind their masks. And you are nothing but a shadow to them. Here, you are not free. You are a vessel, claimed by powers that you cannot escape. In ancient Egypt, there were temples, magnificent temples, grand and holy, tall stone walls, adorned with gods and deities. Incense hung thick in the air. But what if I told you that behind these towering walls, not all was divine? What if I told you that sacred was just a word, a mask for something darker? Behind the rituals, the chanting, and the gold, something more sinister was happening. The gods didn't ask for just offerings. They asked for young girls. They called them wives of the gods, servants of the gods. But what does that even mean when the gods don't really care? When the gods are just an excuse, a veil for the real game? It wasn't about devotion. It was about control, about ownership. Take Nefertari, a 9-year-old girl, 9. The debt of her father could not be repaid in silver, so he gave her away to the temple. She was not asked, she was not chosen. She was a payment, a transaction, a life claimed, a future erased. Imagine her standing there, alone, surrounded by cold stone walls, her small hands trembling, But she says nothing. She can't. There's no choice for her, not anymore. No voice to call out for help, for escape. Her future isn't hers to decide. Her father's debt weighed heavier than her innocence. He couldn't repay in silver, so he gave her away instead. A life traded for the promise of something, anything else. Her name, that's gone now, erased by the priests, replaced with a title given by the temple, which now owned her body and soul. She's not a girl anymore. She's a possession, a tool in their grand design, to serve, to sacrifice, to please. The priests, they don't care about her. They don't care about her dreams, her hopes. She's just another offering, another name lost in their ritual, nothing more, nothing less. And then there was Mutmoya, a girl from Nubia, 8 years old, chosen, just like Nefertari. Chosen because she was beautiful, because her body could serve the temple. It wasn't about her mind. It wasn't about her spirit. It was her body, young, innocent, untouched, that was valued. The temple didn't care about what she could think, what she could say, or the kind of person she could become. Her body was a tool, a vessel for their rituals. Her youth, her beauty, were not hers to cherish, but theirs to use. She was a living offering, a human vessel to fill their sacred needs. It didn't matter if she was scared, if she wanted to run, or if she cried in the dark corners of the temple. Her body was what was needed, and that was enough. Her worth was not measured in who she was, but in how she could serve. And when she no longer served, she was discarded. Just like any other offering. She was not asked. She was not honored. She was taken to a place where silence was power, where devotion meant submission, where no one cared for the person beneath the robes, just the service. The priests, in their sanctity, held the power. They wore the masks of the gods. They spoke the language of divinity. But what they really spoke was control. And the girls spoke nothing. They learned silence quickly. Silence became their life. Work, day in, day out, weaving, cleaning, preparing offerings, singing in the temple. This wasn't service. This was life behind bars. The gods demanded their offerings. And these girls, they were the offerings. But resistance? What happened if you resisted? What happened if you dared to defy the temple's will? Well, there were punishments, but not the kind you'd expect. Not loud or public, quiet, subtle. You were sent away, sent to the desert, left to die. No grand tomb, no grand ceremony, just the sand and silence. And when they died, who would know? Who would remember them? The priests had erased their names. The world had erased them, forgotten in the temple's shadow, forgotten in the name of holiness. And when they died, who would know? Who would remember them? No one. Not the priests, not the gods they served. Their lives, their pain, all forgotten. Their names had already been erased, not by time, but by the very hands that claimed to protect them. The priest had made sure of that. In the temple, they were not allowed to exist beyond their duty. When they died, quietly, in the shadows of the temple, without a word, without a witness, who would mark their passing? Who would mourn the lives stolen so young? The world didn't care. It never would. The priests had buried them long before death came, and the world had swept their stories away, in the name of holiness, in the name of sacrifice, forgotten, like so many before them, forgotten by the people who claimed to serve the gods, forgotten in the shadow of those grand stone walls. Their lives weren't worth remembering. They were just another offering. And when the offering was gone, so was the memory. But the priests didn't care. Not a single thought for the girls, not a single ounce of guilt. They had done their duty, fulfilled the divine will, at least in their eyes. They had appeased the gods, satisfied their demands. That was all that mattered. The girls. They were gone. Not just dead, but erased. Silent. Gone without a whisper. No one to call their names. No one to feel the sting of their absence. They had lived as nothing more than offerings. Now, they were nothing at all. The world moved on, like nothing had ever happened. Just another chapter lost in the sands of time. Another forgotten life. Another crushed soul buried beneath the weight of ritual. No one noticed. No one cared. And in the end, they were just another footnote, fading into the nothingness. In the dim, heavy air of the temple, the ritual begins. It's called taharet, purification. But it's not what you think. Purification is meant to cleanse, right? To refresh, to renew. But in this temple, purification is nothing more than a methodical stripping away. First, the bath. Not the kind of bath that soothes. Not the kind that calms or comforts. No, this is a ritual, cold and invasive. The water is icy. It's more than cold. It's unnatural. It bites at the skin, sharp, like needles piercing through her flesh. It seeps deep, deeper than the surface, coursing through her veins and chilling her bones. It's not washing away dirt. It's washing away her identity, her humanity. Each drop feels like a brush with death itself, a reminder that what was hers is no longer hers. With every touch of that cold water, she feels herself being unmade. Her past, her family, everything she ever knew, all slipping away like sand through her fingers. The water doesn't cleanse, it erases. It doesn't just strip away the grime of the day, it strips away who she was. She stands there, numb, feeling herself fade into the nothingness. The water touches her skin like the hands of fate. It's not gentle, it's not kind, it's unforgiving. It feels as though the water is washing her soul, as though it's drowning the very essence of her being. What she was, what she could have been, is being stolen in this freezing torrent. The water doesn't care. It doesn't care about her pain. It doesn't care about her cries or her pleas. It only cares about the ritual. It only cares about the transformation. And by the time the water finally drains away, so much of her has already gone. The girl who walked in, the daughter, the child, the person, she is already gone. Only the shell remains. She's not just being cleaned, she's being prepared. Prepared to become someone else. Someone who belongs to the temple, to the priests. Her name, gone. Her family, gone. Her future, gone. Once the water has done its work, they bring the razor. It's cold. Cold in a way that sends a shiver down the spine. Sharp, unyielding. A blade that has no mercy, no tenderness. The first stroke is swift. The sound of the razor slicing through hair, it's almost too loud. A crisp, unnatural noise that echoes in the silence. And with each pass, a piece of her is lost. Her hair, the one thing that had once marked her as herself, the one thing that made her her, it falls away in slow, deliberate clumps. Once, it had framed her face. Once, it had been her pride, her beauty. But now, it's just a pile at her feet, a pile of something else. The razor moves with purpose. It doesn't care. It doesn't ask if she's ready. It doesn't care about the tears that well up in her eyes. It's too late. Every strand that falls, it feels like a piece of her is taken. Her identity, gone. Her family, gone. Her future, gone. The last lock falls, and with it, any hope she had of reclaiming what was once hers. Her scalp, now exposed, is a raw, vulnerable thing. It stings under the cold air, a constant reminder that she is not herself anymore. She is nothing but a canvas now, a canvas for the temple's brand of divinity. No more reflection of who she was, only the raw, naked truth of what she's become. her identity, stripped away. There's nothing left. Nothing but the temple. The smooth skin beneath feels like a blank canvas, but not in the way you might think. It's not the freedom of a fresh start. No, it's a barren expanse, empty, waiting to be marked. But not with dreams, not with hopes, only with what they want. It's a canvas, yes, but it's not hers to fill. It's theirs. The razor has left a trail of silence, a silent claim over her body. Her skin is untouched, but only for a moment before they carve into her, a moment before they give her a name that is not hers, a purpose that is not her own. They rename her, a name chosen by them, a name that has no ties to who she was, no connection to her family, her past, her life. She is no longer her, she is a number, a thing. And then comes the final act, the one they call the divine union, the hon foi than tan. A name that sounds grand, sounds almost beautiful, but it's not. It's a euphemism for something far more sinister. The priest stands before her, draped in robes of ceremonial gold, a presence so heavy it presses into the air. His face is hidden, lost beneath layers of fabric, but his presence, unmistakable. He is not a man to her now. He is something more, something higher, a god in his own mind, a deity draped in power, his every step echoing with the weight of his own self-importance. The temple has crowned him with this belief. He is above her, above anyone. The robes, the golden adornments, they are symbols of his superiority, his divine right to control. He approaches her slowly. There's no urgency in his steps, no rush to the ritual. He knows she won't move. She can't. She stands still, frozen in place, her silence as thick as the air between them. It is the silence of submission, the silence of someone who knows their place. She doesn't speak, not a word, not a protest, not a plea. She has been taught well. Her body is no longer hers to control. Her thoughts are no longer her own to speak. It is the temple's now, her body, her soul, all surrendered to its will. Her future, that's gone too, no longer hers to choose. Her path is set by those who hold the power, those who wear the robes and speak the language of gods. And she is nothing but an instrument now, an offering, a vessel for their rituals, a thing to be used. Her future, her hopes, her desires, and they are nothing. Her body, it belongs to the temple, and soon, so will everything she has left. She doesn't consent. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't even know what this is. But she is a part of the ritual, a tool for the priests to use, a vessel for their desires, disguised as a sacred offering. The priest touches her. His hands, cold and clinical, press against her skin with no care, no warmth. His touch is distant, like a man who's never known tenderness, never known the meaning of connection. He doesn't see her as a person. He sees her as an object. Her innocence? It means nothing to him. It's irrelevant, lost in the sacred rituals, buried beneath the weight of the god's demands. His hands roam over her body, not with the slightest thought of reverence, not with the slightest care for who she is, but only for what she represents. Her body is merely the vessel, the instrument used to appease the gods. He touches her without hesitation, his hands rough, unyielding, moving with the practiced ease of someone who has done this 1,000 times before. Each touch is deliberate, cold, as if her body were nothing more than a tool to be used, a function to be fulfilled. There is no gentleness here, no softness, no empathy. His hands move like machines, skimming over her skin, as if her pain, her terror, doesn't matter. And then, with a swift, callous movement, he rips her clothes, tears through the fabric with no regard, the sound of the cloth ripping loud in the quiet. Her body exposed, no longer her own, as he strips away not just the fabric, but everything she once was. Her chest heaves, her breath shallow, but she doesn't scream. She's been taught silence. She's been taught that this is her place. But inside, she is breaking. Inside, her world is unraveling with each violent tug, each tear of fabric, each touch that invades her body. There is no affection in the way he moves, no moment of tenderness, just the cold, brutal satisfaction of a ritual that must be completed, a ritual that dehumanizes, that turns her into nothing more than a thing to be used. And when he's finished, when her body is no longer hers to claim, he steps back, leaving her exposed and trembling, stripped of her dignity, her identity, her innocence. No comfort, no words, just the hollow, cold finality of the act and the brutal reminder that she was never more than an offering. When he's finished, he steps back, without a glance, without a word. There is no moment of connection, no acknowledgement of what has happened. Just the hollow satisfaction of a ritual completed, a task checked off, like another piece of property used, discarded, forgotten. Her body, now empty of purpose, now empty of meaning, is left behind. And he walks away. The ritual is over. But for her, the nightmare has only just begun. When it's over, she is left standing there, empty, nothing more than a tool that served its purpose. She isn't a girl anymore. She isn't a person. She's a possession, a tool to keep the gods appeased, a tool to keep the temple powerful. Her name, her identity, everything she was before entering the temple, it no longer matters. The priests don't care. They've done their job. They've fulfilled the ritual. The gods are satisfied. And the girl, she's forgotten. Her name lost in the sands of time. Her face erased from history. Just another offering to the gods. Just another soul who was never allowed to live. When you think about it, it's almost funny. Not funny in a comedic way. Not at all. Funny in the sense that this whole process, this whole farce, is called a divine union. As if she's being honored. As if she's being made part of something sacred. But no one would call it a union. Not by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a means to an end. She is a tool. She was never meant to be anything else. And once she's used up, well, she fades into the background. Just like all the others before her. She's nothing. Not a person. Not a name. Just another pawn in the priest's game. But the temple moves on. It doesn't pause for breath. It doesn't care for the broken bodies or the empty souls it leaves behind. The priests continue their rituals, each one a repetition of the last, their power untouched, unquestioned. They go through the motions, each one a step in the same mechanical dance. They don't stop. They don't reflect. They simply take what's offered and give nothing in return. And the world, it doesn't notice. It never does. From the outside, it looks so grand, so holy, so necessary. The priests perform their duties, the rituals are followed, and the world spins on, unaware. But what happens inside? The world doesn't see that. You see, in the end, it's all just a system, a machine, running without care, without pause. A well-oiled machine, turning, churning out lives that don't matter, only to dispose of them when they're no longer useful. The girls, they are just cogs in the machine, disposable, replaceable. Their pain is a footnote, their suffering, an afterthought. The temple thrives, the priests grow in power, but the cost is never counted. And when they're done with the girls, when their bodies have been used, when their souls have been drained, they are discarded, just like that, thrown away, as if they were never even there. And the world moves on. It doesn't care. It never will. The priesthood thrives, the gods are satisfied, and the girls? they are lost, forgotten, erased from history. But the temple, it still stands, just another chapter in the story of power and silence. So, what does that leave us with? A simple truth, a cold, hard fact. In the end, the temple didn't care about them. It never did. The temple was not a place of sanctuary, not in the way one might imagine. It was more like a prison, though no one dared call it that. Daily life inside followed a monotonous routine, endlessly repetitive. Work that never ceased, work that never changed. The girls were given simple tasks at first, the kind that didn't demand much from the body, but gradually it wore away at something much deeper. Dying threads, the colour seeping into the fibres, much like the temple's control seeped into their lives. Preparing offerings, arranging fruits, grains, incense, all for rituals that had no true meaning, except to keep the temple running and the rituals ongoing. They sang too, soft chants, repeating the same ancient prayers until the words lost their meaning. Their voices rose and fell in a monotonous cadence, mirroring their lives, a never-ending repetition of the same tasks, as if on an unbroken cycle, spinning around and around, never stopping, only circling back again. They wove, hands moving in rhythm with an invisible clock. Thread after thread, they wove the fabric that would serve the gods, or more accurately, the priests. But they didn't think about that. They couldn't. They were too absorbed, too busy with the endless, mindless tasks, preparing offerings, laying them out before the gods, watching as the priests took them, took everything. Every task was a reminder that they were not free. They weren't free to think, to dream, or to live. Their bodies were there to serve, to work, to produce. But for what? Their lives had no purpose except to serve the gods. Or more precisely, the priests who spoke for the gods. The priests were the real power. They were the ones who lived as gods. And the girls? They were nothing more than instruments, tools to keep the gods pleased. But the gods weren't really the point. It was about power. It was about control. Every thread they dyed, every offering they prepared, every prayer they sang. It was all part of a system that ensured the priests stayed in charge, that kept the temple alive, that kept the girls silent and obedient, never questioning why. Their purpose wasn't their own, it was assigned to them, and it was the only one they knew. But deep down, they might have wondered, is this all there is? Is this all life was ever going to be? Of course they couldn't ask. Questions were dangerous. Thinking was dangerous. So, they just wove, prepared, and sang, day in, day out, all to make sure the priests kept their power, all to ensure the gods stayed happy. And all the while, their lives and identities faded into the background. The work was dull. It didn't require thought, just hands, busy hands, moving, weaving, folding, preparing, repeating, day after day. And the silence. It wasn't the peaceful silence you might imagine. It wasn't the quiet of a place of reflection, thought, or contemplation. No, it was a different kind of silence, one that pressed on your chest, filling the air until it felt suffocating. The girls weren't allowed to speak, not unless spoken to, not unless ordered. Their words were meaningless. The only sounds were the soft rustling of fabric, the murmurs of ancient chants, and the endless repetition of their tasks. They were never alone, not really. There were always eyes on them, priests, attendants, all watching, waiting for any sign of rebellion. Every action was scrutinized, every movement monitored. There was no privacy, no escape. The temple had its rules, its order, its control. And the girls, they were the ones who had to maintain it. They were always watched, always kept in line, always reminded that they were nothing more than tools to serve, tools to appease the gods, tools to ensure the priest's power never waned. It wasn't just the work that was stifling. It was the silence, the suffocating silence that came with it. They weren't allowed to speak. They weren't allowed to question. Not their purpose, not their place. And there was the constant, ever-present threat of punishment. Punishment for the smallest slip, the smallest sign of defiance. And if they failed to maintain their purity, if they failed to keep their silence, the examination would come, the purification check. A routine, but one filled with dread. A ritual disguised as ensuring they stayed clean, holy, pure. But it wasn't about purity. It was about control. It was about making sure they stayed in their place. The girls knew what was coming. There was no uncertainty, no surprise. They could feel it in the air, the subtle shift, the way the priest's eyes would linger on them, as if measuring, assessing. They knew the routine. The priests would come, like clockwork, their footsteps echoing down the cold stone halls, reminding them that the watchful eyes were never far. They would come, and the inspection would begin. But it wasn't about their health or their duties. No, this was much more personal, much darker. Their bodies would be inspected, examined like cattle, not for their talents, not for their minds, but for their submission. They never knew when it would happen. It could come at any moment. A priest would approach, look them over, and if they found anything that showed a sign of weakness or rebellion, the punishment would be swift. It was a cruel game, this ritual of purity, a game where only one side ever won. The priests. And the girls. Well, they learned quickly that the only way to survive was to remain invisible, to remain silent, work, prepare the offerings, sing the prayers, do as you're told, and never ever speak. Because speaking was dangerous, and thinking wasn't allowed. So the days passed in silence. The girls wove, they prepared, they sang, they waited for the next inspection. And when it was all over, when their bodies had been inspected, prodded, measured, and deemed pure enough to continue serving, they would return to their tasks. There was no celebration, no acknowledgement of their compliance, just the dull, cold certainty of it all. Back to the routine, back to the endless work, dyeing the threads, preparing the offerings, singing the ancient hymns, chanting them until their voices were hoarse, until their minds were numb to the meaning. Just more work, more servitude, the same tasks, repeated day after day, like the ticking of an ancient clock, measuring their lives in minutes, in hours, but never in moments of joy, never in moments of freedom. Until the next time, until the next inspection, until they were needed again, to be checked, to be measured, to prove their worth by how well they could submit. It was a cruel cycle, a system built to wear them down, to break their will, to ensure they never forgot their place. A never-ending loop where time didn't flow but circled, around and around. They would never escape it. The tasks were never done. The work was never complete. Their bodies would always be measured, always inspected, always watched. It wasn't about the work. It was about control. It was about keeping them occupied, keeping their minds and bodies so busy, so preoccupied with the repetitive nature of the tasks, that they would never stop to think, never stop to question. And the temple kept going. It never stopped. It never noticed the lives it consumed. It just moved on, one ritual after another, one girl after another. And the world? The world didn't care. The temple's power remained. And the girls? They remained silent. After all, silence was the only thing they had left. But soon, they'd realize something darker. The work, the silence, the inspections. They were just the beginning. In the heart of the temple, beneath the towering columns and sacred symbols, there was another kind of ritual. Not the kind that is sung about, not the kind that's written in the texts, but a ritual that was darker, far more twisted than anything the gods might have demanded. It was called the Sacred Union, a name that sounds holy, doesn't it? Sounds like something pure, something divine, but it wasn't. No, not at all. The priest, cloaked in his ceremonial robes, stood before her. A girl, perhaps no older than 14. And in that moment, he wasn't a man. He wasn't even a priest. He was a god. Or at least, that's what he told himself, as he approached her with cold, deliberate steps. He was the embodiment of power, the physical manifestation of the divine. At least, that's what the priests claimed. To them, he was untouchable. To her, he was just a man who held a position of unimaginable control. A man who used his power to exploit and subjugate. It was never a union, of course. A union implies consent, a bond. But what happens when there is no choice? What happens when the girl has been stripped of everything? Her name, her identity, her dignity. What happens when she stands in the shadow of a so-called god, forced into submission, while the world around her pretends this is all sacred? The priest touched her. He didn't ask. He didn't seek permission. He didn't care. His touch was the touch of authority, the touch of someone who knew he could do as he pleased. Her body was not hers anymore. It was just the next step in a ritual that would continue for centuries. As the ritual unfolded, it became clear. This was no divine marriage. Not even close. This was no sacred bond between gods and mortals. This was a far darker thing. An act of exploitation, disguised in the language of holiness. The priest moved toward her with a confidence born of centuries of power. He wasn't a man in this moment. He was a god. A god with no compassion, no tenderness, just an insatiable hunger for control. With a single motion, he ripped the fabric from her body. The sound of tearing cloth echoed like a scream, like a warning that no one would ever hear. The girl froze, her skin exposed to the cold air, but not for her comfort, not for her protection. It was for his satisfaction. He didn't care about her resistance, her fear, her reluctance. He wasn't interested in her consent. No, his hands were firm, his grip unyielding as he tore the last remnants of her dignity away, leaving her naked and vulnerable. He threw her onto the bed, her body landing with a thud. She barely had time to register the impact before his weight was on top of her. He didn't even pause, his movements mechanical, like someone used to doing this over and over again. His hands gripped her arms, forcing them above her head, pinning her down, her body no longer hers to control. His hands moved across her skin, brushing with no care, no affection. Just the cold, unfeeling touch of power. Her chest heaved as she tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, suffocating. There was no escape, no release. His mouth pressed against hers, not in a kiss, but in an act of domination, taking what he wanted, taking what he could, until there was nothing left but submission. As he pulled away, she lay there, still, silent. Her body wasn't her own anymore. Her thoughts weren't her own. And then came the consequences. He didn't just claim her body. He claimed her future. The cycle didn't end. It never ended. Each child born into this world would grow up, only to become another offering, another body for the temple, another tool to maintain the power of those in control. And it was all justified, all made holy by the priests, who hid behind the robes of divine authority. But the truth was simple. It was a cycle of victimization, a cycle of broken lives and stolen futures. And when it was over, when the girl's body had served its purpose, she would be discarded. Not in any grand, ceremonious way, not with the reverence one might expect from the so-called divine. No, she would be discarded like a broken tool, like an item no longer needed. quietly, without fanfare, without ceremony. Just another cog in the temple's grand machine, another piece of flesh and bone, used until there was nothing left. Her life? Her body? They were never hers to begin with. They were never meant to be hers. She was a tool, an object, an instrument for the temple to use, to maintain its power, to feed its endless cycle. Once she had given all she could, her body, her spirit, her hope, she was discarded. Not even a thought given to her. She was just another nameless, faceless girl who had done her part. And then, the cycle continued. Another girl would be chosen. Another body would be marked. Another life would be bent to the temple's will. And the children born into this world, they would grow up knowing nothing but the temple's demands. Nothing but the weight of tradition. The weight of servitude. They would be raised in silence, in obedience. Their lives would never be their own. They would be taught that they existed only to serve, only to keep the machine running, to feed the system that had claimed their mothers, their fathers, and now them. They would grow up, never knowing freedom, never knowing what it meant to choose their own path. Their future would be predetermined. Their value would be tied to how well they served, how well they obeyed. As the years passed, the priests continued their rituals, their power never wavering. The sacred unions went on, endlessly repeating, generations upon generations of women and children, all bound by the same invisible chains. And what was the result? More bodies, more lives consumed by the temple, more children born into the same broken system. And all of this was justified, wrapped in the language of holiness, of divine will. But when you look closer, when you strip away the sacred robes and the gold, you realize it's just a system that was built to feed on innocence, to feed on power, and to keep everything in place. The priest, the god, the temple, they all thrived on the backs of those who had no choice but to obey. And the world? The world moved on, oblivious. This too was the sacred union. In the temple, resistance was not just discouraged, it was punished, but not with the loud, violent show of force you might expect. No, the punishments were quieter, more insidious. The first method was starvation. Simple, yet it worked. Starvation didn't need any theatrics, no shouting, no violence. Just a quiet, persistent form of punishment, taking away the one thing your body craved the most. Food. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but the effects were immediate, and they were deeply personal. When you resisted, when you dared to push against the system, to question the temple, they didn't have to lift a finger. All they had to do was withhold the food. Take it away. Just like that. You'd feel it right away. At first, it's subtle. A gnawing hunger in the pit of your stomach, a slight dizziness, a dryness in your throat. But after a few days, it grows. That hunger becomes unbearable. It takes over your thoughts, becomes the only thing you can think about. You don't feel human anymore. You feel weak, desperate, a shadow of yourself. A few days without food, and your mind starts to go. Your thoughts become fuzzy, the hunger gnawing at you like a cold, persistent hand in your gut. And when you're weak, when your body feels like it's been hollowed out, you'll say anything, do anything, all to stop the pain. But starvation wasn't the worst of it. No, they had more inventive ways to break you. Then came the darkness, not the kind that falls over the land at night, but a deeper kind of dark. The kind that comes when you're locked away in a cell, a room where the light is kept out, where there's nothing to hear, nothing to see, except the echoes of your own thoughts. The silence becomes deafening. The darkness wraps around you like a blanket, but not a comforting one. It presses in on you, forcing you to face the worst part of yourself, the part that's scared, the part that's unsure, the part that would do anything to escape. And in the stillness of that cell, you begin to lose yourself. Your mind becomes a prisoner to the silence. And when they finally let you out, you're not the same. You're hollow, empty, a shell of the person who walked in. But even that wasn't the worst punishment. No, the final act of cruelty, the one that no one spoke about in polite company, was far more terrifying. They called it returning to the desert, or more ominously, returning to chaos. It wasn't just a punishment, it was a death sentence. They didn't execute you in the temple. No, they didn't need to do that. They just sent you out into the barren wasteland outside. No food, no water, no shelter. Just the endless expanse of the desert, the heat pressing down on you like a fist. And the worst part, you didn't know if anyone would come to find you. No one knew what happened out there. No one cared. Out in the desert, you were nothing. Just a body left to die, lost in the sands, lost in the chaos. The priests didn't even need to lift a finger. They just let nature do its work. It was a warning, a reminder to the others. Stay in line, stay obedient, or this could be your fate. But the truth was, it wasn't just a punishment. It was a form of control, a way to keep everyone in check, to make sure no one ever dared to defy the temple. After all, who would risk being sent into the desert? Who would choose to fight when the consequences were so severe? And just like that, the fear returned. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was always there, waiting, lurking beneath the surface. Just a whisper, a shadow, creeping into your mind, reminding you that resistance was futile. Fear was the force that kept everyone in line, kept everyone silent. It wasn't the kind of fear you can easily name. It wasn't the fear of being beaten or yelled at. No, it was more subtle, more insidious. It was the fear of being forgotten, the fear of becoming nothing, the fear of being sent to the desert, or worse, of simply being ignored until you faded away entirely. You see, the temple had a way of keeping fear alive, of making it feel like a constant companion. It wasn't in the punishment itself. It was in the possibility of punishment. The threat of it was always there, hanging over your head like a storm cloud, never fully breaking, but always looming. It was a well-oiled machine. Punishment, fear, obedience. It all worked together, feeding into itself like a cycle that could never be broken. Each act of punishment made the fear stronger, and each moment of fear made obedience easier. It was a delicate balance, but a balance that never faltered. The priests, they didn't have to do much. They didn't need to actively enforce the rules. They didn't need to lift a finger. They just needed to stand back and watch. Watch as the fear took root. Watch as the girls obeyed without question. Watch as the system worked on its own, feeding itself, perpetuating itself. They watched, untouched by the suffering around them. They weren't affected by the hunger, the silence, the broken spirits. To them, it was all part of the divine order. It was just how things were meant to be. Their power remained unchallenged, unshaken by the struggles of those beneath them. They didn't need to engage. They didn't need to care. All they had to do was maintain the system, let it run its course. And as the girls fell into line, as they obeyed and endured, the priests simply watched, content in their superiority, untouched by the pain they caused. It was all a game to them, a quiet, unspoken game. A game they played with the lives of others, without ever getting their hands dirty. The temple continued to thrive. The girls, they learned quickly. They're forgotten, just like that. The names erased, the bodies discarded, not even a stone to mark where they've fallen. When it's all over, there's no grand ceremony, no final moment where their names are spoken, no memorial to their suffering, no mention of what they gave. Just the cold, silent tombs, stacked in the dark, buried in the earth like they never existed. They die, but no one ever remembers. There are no graves for them, no markers to show where they were laid to rest, just a collective silent graveyard where the earth swallows them whole without a trace. They are forgotten, and in the end, that's the worst punishment of all. No one will say their names, no one will tell their stories. The only thing left to them, the only thing they'll leave behind, are the faint scratches on stone, those strange secret carvings, words that weren't meant to be seen, the words they etched deep into the rock, their hands shaking with the weight of what they knew, what they were forced to leave behind. I was once free, the words say, simple, barely a whisper, but those words are everything. They are the last trace of a life that once was, the last echo of their existence, before the temple swallowed them whole. And that's all they get. A few words scratched into stone, so faint, so fragile, hidden from the world, left to die with them in the dark. It's not enough. No, it's never enough. The words they left behind, their final plea to be remembered. It's too little, too quiet, too late. But that's all there is. Just a message on the stone, a whisper in the void, left for no one to hear, for no one to care. No one except the ones who were there, the ones who witnessed their lives, their pain, their quiet defiance, the ones who knew what it was like to be something more, to be a person, before they were erased. They were once free. Once they had hopes. Once they had names. Once they were more than just bodies, more than just instruments of service. But no one will ever know. No one will ever know what it was like to be them. To be human. To be more than what the temple demanded. There will be no grand monuments to their memory. No tombs with their names carved in gold. No monuments raised in their honor. Just forgotten stones, and the faintest trace of the life they once lived. Their names lost, their stories lost. All that remains is silence. And when the priests finally look away, when the rituals are done, they don't think about the ones they've left behind. They don't think about the lives they've broken. They don't care. They just move on. The temple continues. The rituals go on. But what about them? What about the ones who were discarded? What about the ones who were forgotten? Their names are lost, but the truth of their lives will never be erased. Not completely. Not by time. Not by the priests. Even in the silence, they are still there. And maybe, just maybe, someone will remember. But it's a cold comfort, a truth without a voice. The darkness of the temple fades, the whispers of the past quiet. The cold stone walls no longer echo with the sound of suffering. Can you hear the silence now? The soft rustle of the robes. The faint distant chants in the air, like the memory of something long lost. It's over for now. The journey through that distant, forgotten time has ended. We return to the present, back to the warmth, the quiet of your room, where the air feels lighter. The weight of ancient history settles, but we don't carry it with us. It stays behind, where it belongs. If you found this story compelling, let it echo in someone else's mind too. Share it with others, so the whispers of the past continue to travel. If the tale stirred something inside, if the words lingered, give a like what you've heard. A simple click can keep this journey alive. And if you want more, if you wish to return to these quiet, forgotten times, don't forget to subscribe. There's always more to uncover. Goodbye, and we will meet again.